Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. And you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today it is my very great pleasure to introduce you to Danielle Francisco. And Daniel is living in Dubai at the moment. And in 2015, after being laid off twice early in his career and having a strong background in the events trade and publishing industry, he started his own marketing agency. And over the years of hustle and working with corporate brands, he almost came to a point of burnout and put his marriage on shaky ground. And so this wasn't a good place to be. So upon some self-reflection, he wanted to build a business that operates not just on making money, but something little bit more meaningful. So today we're going to be talking about how to build a meaningful personal brand and podcasting as the new way of networking, and how to jump ship from your 9 to 5. So welcome, Daniel, and welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Rose, for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. Perfect. So I guess what happened to you in 2015?
Interesting. So basically, before we go in 2015, what my story was like any other expat, right? So I'm from the Philippines. Interestingly, in 2010, after working 2.5 years in a BPO outsourcing industry in the Philippines, I decided to go in Dubai, as an expat, basically just going on vacation. But when I arrived here, which is like 2010, interestingly, I found that Dubai is a land of opportunity because that was a time where it's starting to picking up from the market where in the US in 2008 the market crashes, and so Dubai is the first country to actually recover fast compared to other ones. So when I arrived here, I tried to work in an industry where I don't have any experience in. And so, because as young as naive as I am, I feel like I can do anything, right? So, I think I was like around 22, 23 back then. So, I don't have any much corporate experience. So, the culture is totally different. And then when I started working here in Dubai, basically, I started to become a little bit arrogant. So that was like my first job. So I've been laid off, first one, and then it humbled me. And then the second one, so so one of my principles, if you wanted to start a career on something, is that you need to start on small companies, because in small companies they teach you different things than you work with big companies. So on my second job, I've been laid off in 2013. So that was like a small company. So just imagine it's a husband and wife business, and then I was the third person. I was the number three. Then we grew up the company until 30 person, and then at the end of like 3 years, I was like burned out. I don't know what to do. And I said, I'm done, and instead, when I submitted my resignation, my boss back then, instead of like accepting it, he called our HR and said, tell Daniel he's fired. So I was like,
What?
exactly. Because like in any other companies, right? If you resign, definitely you will have your end of employee benefits because you work
Mm,
for so long in a company. But then again, the company twisted a little bit, saying that, all right, your performance is not good. You're gonna be laid off, and you won't receive anything, like a single penny. And interestingly, one of the things that really made me, I think, jump into entrepreneurship is because when I received that call, that call that said I'm laid off, like the moment I submitted my resignation, I went home and I received that call. He said, Daniel, tomorrow you need to leave Dubai. And I said, what? I need to leave Dubai? What do you mean? Like, we can only give you your passport and you need to go outside Dubai. If you want to work here, you need to find another way. And I was like, wow. So after working for 3 years for the company, treating like as a family and helping grow the company, I was treated like, a garbage, you can say.
oh,
I'm
well,
sorry
that's
for the
awful.
term. Yeah, it's really awful. I really felt bad. And it took me a time to get peace with it. But then it took me upon as well a self reflection, saying that, if I wanted to live my life on own terms, like I don't want someone to breathe down my neck, should I consider starting my own agency or starting my own company? Because if you wanted to start a company, you need to consider like what are your strengths, what are things that you love. So like any other first time business owners, we start to deliver a service, right? But I didn't know or any have any experience actually to run a proper company. So what I did, I said I don't have any funds. I have zero business background. When I came back to Dubai, so I just stopped over from Hong Kong. Actually, it really interesting because when I left on an airplane in Dubai, one of my friends are telling me because I play in a band in a church, saying, "Where are you? It's time for a practice for a band." I was like, "I'm in Hong Kong." Like, what? Were I just like talking to you yesterday? No, things happen. So when I arrived back in Dubai, I said, I'm gonna work for a small startup that can actually teach me how to run a proper business, how to run operations, how to sell, and how to collect money on time, because those are like the three basic things. And I don't know, have you seen Rose, the movie Founder?
No, I
the,
haven't.
Mac-
No.
the McDonald's founder. So interesting because when I arrived in Dubai, so I did, I submitted all my CVs and all that. So I decided to luckily this company that actually my last 95 hired me because those founders that are in there have two different generational gap. One is a little bit older, so a little bit 50, more on the conservative side, more like, Daniel, you need to deliver results if you wanted to continue working here. The other one is similar age as I am, but he started opening up his company since I think 19 or 20. They're both from Finland. So if you interviewed people from Norway. So
Mm,
you can imagine they're really like conservative type of people, like with this mug,
mm,
I worked with them for 2.5 years, and that's where the time where, all right, I'm gonna treat myself as a sponge, forget everything that I know and try to learn as much as I can. And then at the process of doing that, that is in the publishing industry, just and now you introduce me as building a personal brand because now, when people publish content, people think that you need to like position yourself like as an expert, you do this, do that, but actually there's a lot more deeper than that, because we are tired of reading articles of millionaires, billionaires, like how good they are. Like, really, nobody cares. Like, even when I read, articles like that, all I see is like blah, 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 blah. But if
mm,
you heard someone like, all right, so this person, he or she cares about this cause, he or she, speaks about the truth, and when you search deep, like on Google, you go onto like the 10th page, that's where like the real information is. Maybe like 10 years ago they didn't know, right? Was there. So that's where I all started my career. And it's been, I think, so I started 2015. So it's almost 6 years now, or 5.5 years, I guess, since me and my wife started the business.
oh, wow, that's quite a journey, really. But yeah, it's pretty bad when you hand your resignation in and then they said, "Oh, you're sacked." That's just a bit wrong.
Yes, yes.
But anyway, all right. So tell me a little bit more about the clients that you service, and what do you do for them?
That's a good question. So basically, in the clients that we work with are business owners who own a business, either 6 to 8 figure business, or someone who's just starting out in maybe in the first or second year of business. Now, most business owners, when they start a business, even the most successful ones, maybe they have good reputation offline, like they have like solid background, they have the right partners, the clients, the vendors. But when the COVID happens, most people are like having a hard time to communicate what their business is all about because there's no more meeting online. I'm sorry, there's no more meeting face to face, no more hand holding. So, how do you bridge that gap between offline to online? Is we help them build their own personal brand. And like I mentioned earlier, personal brand is more than, positioning yourself as an expert. It means about building trust, credibility, and authority. And for us, we deep dive in on the things that they really care about. Like, if you put money aside, why would a company or why would someone wanted to work with you, right? Like,
Mm,
for instance, if you search that person's name on Google, what is the first thing that you see? Is it like a complaint? Is it like a good review? Is the review even legit? Or or if you go to the LinkedIn profile, is it consistent to what they say on their website? Because right now there's a lot of information going on, but the challenge is how do we eliminate, or you can say like filter out what people are really saying versus what the real meaning behind it. So we
yeah.
help them out, craft those personal brand in an authentic way, and make sure that it is like a not like a true reflection of who they are offline. Because most people, when they say like, all right, Daniel, do I really need to talk about this? Do I really need to talk about maybe my cats? Do I really need to talk about, the like a nonprofit that I support with? I said, if it might not be relevant to your business, but you are dealing with people, because people deal with people. So if they know more about you, it's just more easier for them to resonate with you and your business. And like, I don't know, some of the brands that you probably know, personal brand has been going on for years.
Hmm.
People thought like digital reputation, even you're so you're from Australia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So personal brand Richard Branson. Virgin has a good, reputation because Richard Branson speaks all the time. He doesn't even need to do that anymore. But he does still continue it because the brand represents him, or him represents a brand. Like even Gordon Ramsay said when he opened his restaurant here, like people when they come into his restaurant, he wants them to smell that he is there inside the kitchen, even though
Yeah.
he's not there. so so it's a similar thing.
Yeah. So I guess you and I are both into podcasting, and you called yours is the host of the Drive to Succeed, which is a
Yes.
great name.
Thank you.
Why is it the new way of networking, and how can we build real relationships doing that?
Exactly. Because back in the day, when you wanted, so for instance, for me, for instance, one of the reasons why I build a podcast is because I'm a traditional business owner. I don't have any visibility online. Like you can see me probably in Trade Center or anywhere in Dubai, and people are like thinking, where do I saw you? Maybe you saw me in an event, or maybe you saw me in a trade show, in a conference, but they didn't know like where I am. So when that totally like starting to what do you call it, like decline because of the market goes down, the budget comes down, and then pandemic happens. So what I said, all right, so what do I need to do in order for me to go out there without actually selling, but just communicating, my business and what do I care most about? And that's where it all started. I said, all right, so I'm not confident on video right now. I might look confident because I've been doing it since 2019. But when I started, I'm actually really terrible. Like if you listen to the first episode of my podcast, my voice was down, my even my body language was down, and I was just like figuring it out along the way. So, and I said I cannot talk for an hour. I cannot talk for at least I even have fear of public speaking. So I said I wanted to start a podcast, interview people, let me go on silent mode, let me go on sponge mode. It brings me back to similar thing as a student, right? When you're curious, you just start to ask something. And for me to develop relationships, like I spoken to speakers who spoke alongside Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, the celebrity speakers that most people probably wouldn't heard of, but in their industry or in their own like own bubble, they might be like celebrities inside there. So I wouldn't have access to them if I don't have my podcast, right? And right nowadays, before, if you wanted to interview them, you need to be a part of like a good media outlet like Forbes, Entrepreneur, CNN, or whatever. But now if you have your own podcast and they see it, all right, so you interview this person, you interview this person, so you collaborated with this person, it just easier for you to network, and then build trust and open up opportunities with them. So that's how it.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
That's a good one. I hadn't thought about it like that. I mean, I've met 160 people since last year, And so some of them we still keep in touch, and I've actually done work for outside of the
Some of them.
podcast for them. So yeah, it's an interesting way to network. But yeah, so and I love doing what I do because I had no idea what I was doing when I started. I just started. I just went and bought a microphone, a camera, and said, "Well, let's just do this." And here I am, still here. Never mind.
Yeah.
So
And by
I
the way,
guess
congratulations on having 160 episodes. That's like really tells you more about like how you make the show consistent, because most people doesn't know how hard it is to produce consistent podcasts and even find guests consistently.
yeah, it is. I'm grateful for people like Matchmaker and and Audrey and all those sorts of places, and word of mouth. I've actually been referred by other previous podcast hosts. They've said, "Oh, look, I've got someone you should interview." So it's just snowballed. It's really taken off. I
Yeah.
can't believe that it's just gone as well as it has.
That's networking, by the
Well, yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. So I guess the next question is, how does someone, leave their normal 9 to 5 and actually turn their passion into a business?
Exact. So that's a good question. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, when I started my own business, I actually didn't start like quit my job, quit my 9 to 5 immediately. So what I did is I look because if you lack a skill set, no matter how good you are in a certain things, you need to wear different hats. Right. If you own a business, you need to learn how to do sales, you do, know, to do marketing, you need to learn how to present, collect money on time, pay, whoever's like working with you as well. But the thing is, during the time back then, I didn't have any experience. So, like I mentioned, I worked for a startup company, and I tried to learn everything inside and out of the company. And then what I did is I focused on four things, right? So, number one is what is the problem that I can solve? So, if I am, I'm providing a service, what is the problem that I can solve with that industry? Now, most people will say, like, Daniel, I don't know, maybe that might not be a problem, right? So how do you validate a problem? By offering something in return. It might be a fee or for a free, right? And then then if you get it for a fee, then kudos for you. So that's one thing. So problem number two is you take inventory of what are the things that excites you the most. Maybe it can be your passion. Maybe some of the people that I work with, they're passionate working with moms. So instead of like targeting the full people, like, because most challenges well with business owners, like, who's your target market? And they're gonna say everyone. You cannot communicate with everyone. You need to select a specific market and then work on that. Once you build your stake on the ground, you try to make it wider, because if you try to communicate to everybody or everyone, that's what my mistake is as well, because I was like chasing here, chasing there, instead of like focusing on one thing and one thing only. So that's number two, passion. You need to learn what excites you the most, right? Number three, like, what is the purpose you're building a business? Earlier we talked about building something that you love, right? For me, when I got married, me and my wife got married, everything changes everything, because me as an eldest of the family, being an independent emotionally as well, living up in a broken and dysfunctional family, I got to make decisions by myself. But then when I got married and she also quit her job to help me in the business, that's what it becomes tricky. Like, all right. So if we're building our marriage, so we're almost getting married. I'm sorry, we're almost getting 5 years now since we got married. So just to have proper context, so we're building a life together, and we're building a business together. So what is the purpose of us working together? And how can we maintain that purpose where we're just not looking beyond to pay the bills, but we're actually looking beyond how can we create a culture for our life, for our marriage, for our business. So that's one of the like tough questions you need to think about, because in the beginning, maybe some people like me can relate that you might be laid off, so why not start something, right? But aside from that, you really need to think what is beyond that. And last but not the least, positioning. Like, how do you position yourself? Do you work with big companies? Do you work with small companies or small business owners? Right? Or how do you, maybe you're talking about like dogs, you walk dogs or something, maybe, but you walk dogs for CEOs who doesn't have time to take care of their pets. So, you know what I mean? You cannot be, like everybody to everybody. So,
Yeah, it is a little bit hard. It is. I mean, the services that I offer in my business are suitable to everybody, but I've had to actually target them in the beginning to
yeah.
suit a certain type of business owner. So yeah, and that used to really bother me a lot, but it's a good strategy to have, because you're right. You can widen your pool once you get your strategy in place. So yeah.
Yes.
Hmm. So, other than on your podcast,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit more about where people can find you.
All right. So they can sorry, most people can find me. I'm pretty much active on LinkedIn. So if they search me on Daniel Francisco, or on Instagram at Daniel underscore Francisco underscore, or they can visit the website at www.danmediagroup.com. So that is my agency's website. So again, we focus on personal branding, podcasting, and PR. And my podcast website is the drive to succeed.com. So and also, I'm pretty much available on all those platforms. So if they just send me a DM or just send me a voice note, I'll be happy to respond as fast as I can. And if you have any questions related to those topics, just anything that you think that I can help you with related to podcast, personal brand, and PR, then do send me a message. And also, Rose, thank you so much for letting me on your show. I hope your audience benefited from it and learned a lot from my story. I'm pretty much transparent and trying to be authentic as much
Yeah,
as
well,
possible.
that's the
So,
only way to be, isn't it? Authentic and transparent. Now, well, you got any last words of wisdom, Daniel?
yes. Oh, any last words of wisdom? So I think one of I would say is that, like, one of the, I always ask this, like, in my podcast I always ask, what's your main drive to succeed, right? For me, if I can just answer that, my main drive to succeed is build a life, a business, a marriage that you can be really proud of. Like, when you remove all of that, what is left? What is left aside from that? That is what you need to build. You need to build looking towards, because your lifetime might be limited on earth, but your kids coming, in the future generation will carry that. So make sure that you build something that you will be proud of.
Ah, that's lovely. Yes, that's some very wise words. Thank you for sharing that. All right,
Thank
Daniel,
you, Rose.
thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's absolute pleasure as well, Rose, and looking forward to hear more of your episode in the future.
Thank you. So talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Talking with the experts.